Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Nightshade. Tonight is like no other night. There are stories that can only be told in the dark when everyone is asleep and fear awakens. Come closer and don't look back. Let's begin. These events took place in the fall of 1994 in a small town outside Portland, Oregon. Even today, the neighbors who lived there refuse to talk about it. Some say the boy still lives with what he saw that night. Others say he never really left that house. It was a cold Friday evening. 11-year-old Ethan Miller was sitting on the couch with his mother, Lisa, when her phone rang. It was her boss. There was a last-minute emergency at the hospital. She was a nurse, and they needed her for the night shift. Ethan's father was away on a business trip, and their usual babysitter was out of town. Lisa hesitated. She looked out the window at the dark sky and said softly, "I'll only be gone for a few hours, honey. You'll be fine, right?" Ethan nodded bravely. He had stayed home alone before, but never this late. By 8:30 p.m., the house was quiet. The storm outside made the lights flicker every few minutes, and the sound of rain tapping on the window mixed with the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan sat watching cartoons, trying to ignore the thunder when he suddenly heard a soft creak upstairs. It was faint, like a step on the old wooden floor of the hallway. He muted the TV and listened. Silence. He told himself it was the wind or the house settling. Still, his eyes wandered to the staircase. Then, another creak, and another. This time closer. Ethan picked up the cordless phone and called his mom. But there was no signal. The storm had cut the power lines. He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and aimed it toward the stairs. "Hello?" he called out. No answer. As he slowly stepped toward the staircase, a flash of lightning lit up the whole house. In that instant, Ethan saw something, a pale face in the upstairs window. Staring down at him, a girl's face. He screamed and dropped the flashlight. When the lights flickered back on, the window was empty. He wanted to run outside, but his mom had locked the doors from the outside. He could only wait until she returned. He went to the living room and tried to keep calm, wrapping himself in a blanket. But then, a faint tapping sound came from the window behind the TV. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate. He turned his head and saw the same girl again, her face pressed against the glass, fogging it up as she breathed. Her eyes were wide, empty. Ethan froze, then she smiled and whispered through the glass, "Can I come in now?" Hours later, Lisa returned home. The storm had passed, and the house was dark except for the flickering TV. She called for her son, but there was no answer. When she stepped into the living room, she found the blanket crumpled on the couch. The front door was unlocked. On the window, she noticed something that froze her blood. A small handprint, too small to be Ethan's, and written below it, in the fogged glass, were 3 words. "Thank you, Ethan." The police never found him, but neighbors still say that when it rains, you can see 2 figures standing in that same window, a boy and a girl, waiting for someone to leave the door unlocked again. It's been 29 years since that night. The official report says, "Missing child, presumed dead." But I was there. I saw what the report left out. My name is Detective Samuel Rains, Portland Police Department, retired. Back in 1994, I was the first officer to enter the Miller residence on Crestwood Lane after Mrs. Miller called 911 at 3:17 a.m. She was hysterical, screaming that her son was gone, that the doors were open, and that someone had been watching from the window. I remember thinking it was just another case of parental negligence, but I was wrong. Horribly wrong. When I arrived, the power was still out. The storm had left branches all over the road, and the air smelled like wet earth and ozone. The front door of the house was slightly open, moving back and forth with the wind. Mrs. Miller was sitting on the couch, trembling, her hands still holding a child's blanket. She kept repeating the same phrase. She took him from the window. I asked her what she meant, but she couldn't answer. She just kept staring at the fogged-up glass where a tiny handprint was still visible. When I looked closer, I saw faint scratches on the window frame, as if small fingers had clawed their way inside. We searched the house top to bottom. No sign of forced entry, no footprints in the mud outside, no broken glass. But in the upstairs hallway, I found something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. The carpet was soaked, though there was no leak from the ceiling. And on that wet carpet were two sets of footprints, one small barefoot, the boy's size, and one even smaller. Those tiny prints stopped right in front of a closet door. I opened it. Inside, the air was freezing. The walls were damp, and drawn on the inside panel in what looked like charcoal was a child's drawing. A stick figure boy standing beside a girl with long hair, both smiling under a window. Between them, in crude black smudges, was something else, a dark shape with long arms stretching around both of them. The next morning, we questioned the neighbors. None of them had seen anyone enter or leave the house. But one old man, Mr. Dodd, who lived across the street, told me something strange. He said that ever since the Millers moved in, he sometimes saw a girl standing by the window in the boys' room, even when Ethan wasn't home. At first, he thought they had another child, but when he asked Lisa about it one day, she turned pale and said, "We don't have a daughter." Over the next few days, the investigation turned cold. There were no suspects, no evidence, just whispers. Lisa refused to stay in the house. She moved in with her sister 2 towns over, and George never came back from his business trip. The property was eventually abandoned, but I couldn't let it go. Something about that drawing in the closet haunted me. It didn't feel like a normal disappearance. There was something old in that house, something that wasn't supposed to exist. A week later, I went back on my own. I shouldn't have. The door was locked, but the key under the mat still worked. The air inside was heavy and cold, even though it was mid-April. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. The couch, the TV, the blanket. But when I looked toward the window, the glass was fogged again, and there, clear as day, was another handprint and smaller than before. I wiped it away with my sleeve. As I did, I heard something upstairs. A soft laugh. A child's laugh. I froze. Every instinct told me to leave. But I climbed the stairs anyway, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The sound came from the boy's bedroom. When I opened the door, the flashlight flickered. The room was empty, except for a small wooden music box sitting in the center of the floor. It began to play by itself, the same melody over and over. And then, as the tune slowed, I saw movement in the corner, a faint shape, barely visible. A little girl, no older than 8, standing by the window. Her eyes were black, like hollow sockets, and she was holding the hand of something behind her, something tall, thin and shapeless as if made of smoke. Before I could move, she smiled at me and whispered, "He's not alone anymore." The lights went out. When I woke up, it was morning. The music box was gone, so were the footprints. I was lying on the floor with frost covering my coat. The official story says I collapsed from exhaustion, but I know so I handed in my badge 2 weeks later. I've spent years trying to forget that night, but sometimes, when the rain hits the windows just right, I still hear that song playing somewhere in the dark. Last month, I got a call from a young couple who had just bought the Miller house. They asked me if I knew anything about its history. I told them it was just an old missing persons case. But 2 nights ago, they called again. They said their 6-year-old son had started talking to someone in the window. He says her name is Lila, and she wants to show him her music box. My name is Evan Pierce, and for the last 12 years, I've tried to convince myself that what happened that night wasn't real. But when you hear footsteps in the same pattern every night, when you see a man's shadow standing perfectly still by your fence long after midnight, and you know you live alone, it becomes harder to call it imagination. This story begins in 1999, in a small quiet town called Ashbury, population barely 4,000. I had just turned 22, broke up with my girlfriend, dropped out of college, and moved back into my late grandfather's house on the edge of town. It was one of those old, creaking farmhouses that smelled of wood and dust, surrounded by acres of dead fields and a single, rusted wire fence that marked the end of the property. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. The first few days were quiet. I unpacked, cleaned, and spent my nights smoking on the porch with the radio humming softly beside me. The only neighbors were the Harveys, an elderly couple who lived half a mile down the dirt road. Sometimes I'd see Mr. Harvey on his tractor, or his wife hanging laundry. That was the extent of my social life. On the fifth night, the weather changed. A low fog rolled over the fields like a slow living thing, swallowing the fence line and the trees beyond it. The crickets stopped singing. The air turned so still it felt wrong. I remember sitting on the porch steps, flicking ashes into the dirt when I saw it, a shape at the far end of the field, standing by the fence. At first I thought it was a post or a trick of the fog, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was a man, tall, motionless, facing the house. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even breathe. From what I could see, just stood there as if waiting. I stayed outside longer than I should have, trying to convince myself it was nothing. When I finally went to bed, I kept my window cracked open, maybe a stupid idea, but I wanted to hear if he moved. At around 2:14 a.m., I woke up to the faint sound of gravel crunching, slow, measured, like someone walking in circles around the house. I didn't look out the window. I just lay there, frozen, eyes open, heart pounding. The sound stopped eventually, but the next morning, I found something in the mud below my window. A single, clear boot print, too large to be mine. That day, I went to town and asked around about the property. An old man at the hardware store told me something strange. Said my grandfather had once had trouble with a man, a drifter who used to come by asking for work, for food, for anything. Apparently, my grandfather had turned him away one night during a snowstorm. The man froze to death by the fence. They found him standing upright, leaning against the wire as if trying to climb over before he died. The sheriff at the time said the body was still warm when they brought it in, but his eyes were open, and they never closed. I laughed it off. People in small towns loved their ghost stories. But that night, the man was back. He stood closer this time, maybe 50 feet from the porch. I could see the faint glimmer of his eyes reflecting the porch light. I called out, "Hey!" And he took a single step forward, then stopped. That was enough. I went back inside, locked every door, and called the sheriff's office. Deputy Harlan Dick showed up 20 minutes later, a heavy man with a lazy southern drawl. He shined his flashlight across the field and said, "Ain't nobody out there now. Probably a hunter or some drunk from town." I wanted to believe him, until he followed the light beam to the fence. There were prints in the dirt, deep, heavy ones. They led from the fence all the way to my porch, and stopped at the bottom of the steps. No prints going back. Over the next week, I barely slept. Every night I'd hear faint movement outside, slow dragging sounds, sometimes tapping on the glass, sometimes whispering like wind under the door. I started drinking again. The sound of my own heartbeat kept me awake. On the 8th night, I tried something different. I set up my grandfather's old camcorder facing the field, left the porch light on, and went to bed early. At 3:07 a.m., I woke up to static. The TV had turned itself on, showing the camcorder feed, only it wasn't pointing at the field anymore. It was pointing at me. The camera had been moved inside my room, and in the far left corner of the screen, for less than a second I saw a tall figure standing by the doorway, face blurred, head tilted like a broken doll. I ran out of the house barefoot, straight down the road to the Harveys. They took me in, made coffee, tried to calm me down. When Mr. Harvey went back to check the house at dawn, he found the front door wide open and the camcorder smashed to pieces in the hallway. He said something else too, something I'll never forget. He said when he got there, the radio was on, playing a song that hadn't aired in decades. A gospel hymn called "Let Him In." The same song, He said they'd played at my grandfather's funeral. After that night, I moved into town for good. I rented a cheap apartment above the post office, sold the property a few months later to a couple from Seattle who wanted a quiet countryside home. They lasted 2 weeks. The husband went missing. First, they found his truck abandoned by the same fence line. The wife left the next day, saying she heard someone knocking on the walls at night. The house has been empty since. 2 weeks ago, 12 years later, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It was my old house, taken from across the field. And there, standing by the fence, was a man, same height, same tilt of the head. On the back of the photo, written in shaky pen, were 4 words, and he never left. Evan. I burned the picture, moved apartments again, stopped answering the phone. But the last 2 nights I've heard tapping on my window. Slow, deliberate, and this morning before leaving for work, I found muddy boot prints on the fire escape outside. Only one set, leading toward my window, none leading away. Sometimes, I still dream of the fence, of the fog rolling in, covering everything in white until there's nothing left but the sound of footsteps behind me. And when I turn around, he's there, standing exactly where I left him, only now he's smiling. It had been empty for nearly 12 years. Neighbors stopped talking about it, stopped looking at it. The old Miller house at the edge of Coldwater Lane was the kind of place kids dared each other to run up to and touch the front door. When Daniel and Claire Foster bought it, everyone thought they were crazy. They'd just moved from Seattle, looking for a quiet life. They said they wanted a place with history. They got exactly that. The first night was peaceful. The sound of the trees outside, the faint whistle of the wind through the cracks in the windows. The house smelled of dust and old wood, but Claire said it felt alive. Daniel didn't like that phrase. 2 weeks later, the noises began. They weren't loud, not enough to panic one, but noticeable. Footsteps above their bedroom, even though the attic had been sealed shut. A door creaking in the hallway when they were both sitting at the table. At first, Daniel laughed it off. Old houses make sounds, he'd say. But one night, around 2 a.m., he woke up to the faint sound of a child's voice whispering. He couldn't make out the words, just the tone, soft, almost curious. It was coming from the living room downstairs. When he got there, the TV was on and playing static. The remote was on the table. He turned the screen off and stood still for a moment, trying to calm his heartbeat. That's when he noticed something written on the fogged glass of the window beside the couch. Hello? He wiped it away, thinking maybe it was Claire's breath from earlier. But the glass was cold to the touch, too cold. A few days later, Claire found something in the basement, an old VHS tape, covered in dust. It had a small white label with the words, Coldwater, 1994, Ethan. She showed it to Daniel at dinner. He didn't want to play it, but Claire was curious. That night, they dug out an old VHS player from a box and inserted the tape. The video opened with a shaky home recording, a woman's voice laughing, a little boy waving at the camera, then a cut, darkness, and another scene. The same boy sitting alone on the couch watching TV. Claire leaned forward. Daniel, that's this house. He looked closer. The layout was identical. Same wallpaper, same windows, even the same sofa. The boy on the screen looked around nervously, as if hearing something. Then the tape went black. Static filled the room. They waited. For a second, there was nothing. Then a face appeared in the static, pale with wide, hollow eyes, staring directly into the camera. The sound cut. The tape ejected itself. Neither of them spoke. That night, Claire dreamed of the boy. He was standing at the foot of their bed, whispering something she couldn't understand. When she woke up, Daniel was sitting up, pale and sweating. He'd had the same dream. They decided to burn the tape the next morning. But when Daniel went to get it from the drawer where they'd left it, it was gone. Weeks passed. The strange things escalated, lights flickering, doors slamming. Sometimes Claire swore she saw a small handprint on the mirror after her shower. Once, she heard a giggle from inside the closet. Then came the night of the storm. Rain lashed against the house. Wind howled through the chimney. Daniel was in the kitchen when he heard the front door creak open. He rushed out. It was swinging slowly, as if someone had just entered. "Claire?" He called, no answer. Then, from the living room, came the sound of the VHS player turning on by itself. The TV flickered to life, and the same boy appeared again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Next to him stood a girl, her face blurry, moving closer to the camera. Her lips moved silently before the screen cut to black. Daniel yanked the tape out. It was burning hot to the touch. On the label, new words had been written beneath Ethan's name. "She's back." The next morning, Claire was gone. The bed beside Daniel was empty, the sheets cold, the front door was unlocked. On the window, written in the fog, were 3 new words, in the same small handwriting that had once said, "Hello." "Thank you, Claire." No one saw Daniel again either. A year later, new owners moved in. They found a burnt VHS tape buried in the backyard, still half intact. When police tried to restore it, they saw only static. But just before the tape ended, a faint image appeared. 2 children standing by the window of the cold water house, smiling, and behind them, in the reflection of the glass, a tall figure with its hand resting gently on their shoulders. The house on Collinghall Road. I don't know the exact moment it began. Maybe it was when I took the wrong turn that night. I was driving through a dense forest, somewhere far from town, when the GPS suddenly died. No signal, no sound, only the hum of the engine and the black road that stretched endlessly ahead. That's when I saw the sign, Collinghall Road. I'd never heard of it. It wasn't on any map, but my fuel was almost gone, and the fog was getting thicker, so I turned. The road was narrow, lined with crooked trees that leaned toward each other like they were whispering secrets. After a few minutes, my headlights caught something in the distance, a structure, maybe a house. At first, I thought it was abandoned. Then I saw a faint light flicker in one of the windows, like a candle. The place looked wrong. The roof sagged. The front door hung halfway off its hinges, and the air around it felt heavy. Still, I told myself someone must live there. Maybe they had a phone. Inside, the air was thick with dust and rot. It smelled like wet wood and something metallic. The floorboards groaned under my feet. The walls were covered with old photographs, families, children, smiling faces. But every single picture had been scratched out. Eyes erased. Mouth smeared into nothing. Only faint outlines of what used to be people remained. Something creaked above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I froze. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" No answer, only silence. And then the door behind me slammed shut. I spun around, no wind, no one there. The room went darker. The flicker of my phone's flashlight caught something on the wall. Tiny handprints, dozens of them smeared in a dark reddish stain. I backed away toward the stairs. The house groaned, like it was breathing, and then, from the top of the stairs, I heard a voice, soft, broken, like someone whispering through glass. "You shouldn't have come here." I wanted to run. I swear I did. But my legs wouldn't move. Something about that voice felt familiar, like I'd heard it before, maybe in a dream, or a memory I'd buried deep. When I finally forced myself to look up, there was someone standing there, barefoot, pale, their head tilted slightly, eyes reflecting my phone's light like animal eyes. They didn't move, they just watched me. And behind them, in the hallway, the doors were opening one by one. Each door revealed a dark room, and from every room, shadows began to crawl out, bending and twitching as if the walls themselves were spitting them out. I turned and ran for the front door, but it was gone. There was only more hallway, stretching endlessly in both directions. The whisper came again, closer this time. "You can't leave. You're part of the house now." The floor beneath me felt warm, like flesh. The photographs on the wall began to bleed, red seeping through the scratched faces. And the light, that faint candlelight I'd seen from the road, was now flickering inside the walls themselves. I screamed. No one heard. The house didn't echo my voice. It swallowed it. And somewhere, far above, that same soft voice laughed, low and broken, as if it had been waiting all along. There was no way out. Not then. Not now. And if you ever find yourself driving down a road that isn't on your map, and you see a house with a light flickering inside, keep driving. Because some places don't want to be found, and some houses remember you. It had been 12 years since anyone mentioned Collinghall Road. Locals said it didn't exist anymore. The forest had swallowed it, or maybe the town had decided to forget. But one night, Officer Daniel Reeves got a call. A woman's voice, panicked and broken. "Please, my husband went down Collinghall Road. He hasn't come back." Daniel checked the map. There was no Collinghall Road. Only an old, faded mark where a road might have been. Decades ago, still he drove. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even his police radio hissed with static, then went dead completely. He followed the dirt path until the headlights caught something massive in the dark. A house, half sunken into the earth. Vines crawling over its walls. He stepped out of the car. The air was colder here. And as he looked up at the house, he saw something impossible. A faint light flickering in the upstairs window. Inside, dust covered everything. But someone had been there recently. Footprints in the grime, leading deeper into the house. He followed them into the hallway. That's when he noticed the pictures. Every photo had faces scratched out, just like the report said from years ago. Except for one. One photograph still had its face intact. A young man, standing in front of a police car, smiling. The name tag read, Daniel Reeves. He froze. That was him. A sound came from upstairs. Slow, dragging steps. He called out, "This is Officer Reeves. Who's there?" No answer. Only the soft creak of floorboards above. He drew his gun and climbed the stairs. Each step groaned like it resented his weight. Halfway up, the lights flickered, not electric light, but candle light, dancing from an unseen source. And then he smelled it. Rot. Old. Wet rot. At the top of the stairs was a door, half open, swaying slightly. Inside, he could hear something whispering, words so low he couldn't understand. He pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for a single chair facing the wall. On it sat a man slumped forward, unmoving. Daniel approached slowly. "Sir?" he said. The man lifted his head, and Daniel saw his own face staring back at him. He stumbled back, nearly falling. The figure smiled, crooked and slow, and whispered, "You found the house. Now it's found you." The walls began to shift. Photographs started sliding down, one by one, as if the house was breathing again. Somewhere behind him, the front door slammed, though he hadn't touched it. He ran down the stairs, but the hallway was different now, longer, darker, filled with whispers and flickering light that moved inside the walls. Every photo on the wall now showed him. Hundreds of versions of him, standing in the doorway, sitting in the chair, staring at himself. The last thing the dispatch heard before the line went dead was Daniel's voice, trembling, saying, "Why, it's real. The house is alive." No one ever found him, only his car, parked on a road that wasn't supposed to exist. And at night, when the fog rolls through the trees, locals say you can still see a faint candlelight flickering behind the upstairs window, waiting. It started as a college project. 3 film students from Boston, Eli, Marla, and Tom, decided to make a short documentary about urban legends that turned real. Eli found the story of Collinghall Road buried in a police archive, a missing officer, a vanished man, a road that doesn't exist. The perfect horror story, they thought. Marla laughed when she read the files. Haunted house, cursed road, missing copping, it's every cliche ever. But Tom, the quiet one, looked uneasy. Then why was his voice still recorded after the call ended? No one answered. They drove 6 hours to the location the old report mentioned. Nothing there, just forest. No road signs, no houses. Until somehow they found it. A narrow path of broken asphalt, half swallowed by roots. At the end of it, the house stood waiting, tilted slightly to one side, like it had been leaning in to listen for years. "This is gold," Eli said, setting up his camera. Creepy, but perfect. The camera's audio picked up faint static, a soft hiss that grew louder the closer they got. Inside, the air felt wrong. Heavy. Each breath echoed in their microphones like they were in a tunnel. Marla found the old photographs first. They were still there, scratched faces, empty eyes. Except this time, one new photo was pinned to the wall. It was a still image from Eli's camera, showing the three of them standing at the front door. Eli swore he hadn't taken it, but when he rewound the camera, the footage showed the picture already hanging there before they entered the house. "Okay, we're leaving," Tom said. "This isn't funny." They turned toward the front door, but it wasn't there. Just more hallway. Longer now. The air began to hum, low and steady like something alive beneath the floorboards. Marla's camera started recording by itself. The viewfinder showed a man walking down the same hallway, only it wasn't any of them. The man's face was pale, blurred, and his voice came through the speaker, whispering. "You came back." They ran. Every room looked the same, doors looping into each other, stairs that went nowhere. Eli screamed when he saw his reflection in a cracked mirror. It wasn't him. It was the missing officer, Daniel Reeves, mouthing silent words behind the glass. Tom tried to smash the camera, but it wouldn't break. The lens cracked, yet kept filming, showing things not in the room. Dozens of figures standing in the dark. Just beyond the walls, the lights flickered, one by one. Their cameras went black. Days later, hikers found their abandoned car at the edge of the forest. The camera was inside, still recording, battery drained except for the final 2 seconds. In the footage, the house stands perfectly still. Then, just before the tape cuts, a faint light flickers in the upstairs window. And if you turn the volume high enough, you can hear Marla's voice whispering from somewhere deep inside the static. 2 years after the 3 film students vanished, a short video appeared on a horror forum. It was titled simply, "Found Footage, Calling Hall Road, Uncut." No one knew who uploaded it. The account was deleted minutes later, but not before thousands of people downloaded it. The video was only 10 minutes long. The first half looked like a normal student documentary. Shaky camera work, interviews, static. But halfway through, the footage changed. The frame froze, then flickered. And suddenly, the camera wasn't in anyone's hands. It was moving through the house by itself. Viewers described the same thing. No matter where they lived, a hallway with no end, a whisper in the background, and a candlelight pulsing like a heartbeat. Some said they heard their own name whispered through their speakers. Others swore that when they paused the video, they saw their reflection standing behind them, not in their room, but inside the frame. A few days after the upload, strange reports began appearing online, computers freezing, webcams turning on by themselves, and a faint sound of breathing through the speakers, even when the device was unplugged. A Reddit user named Darkroom94 posted the last known comment about it. "I watched the tape. The house, it's real. It's not just footage. It watches back." He attached a screenshot, a single frame showing the hallway, and at the far end a man in a police uniform, face pale and blurred, Officer Daniel Reeves. Within an hour, the account was deleted, no trace. Now, the file still circulates under different names. The calling tape, house footage, real MP4, don't watch this MP4, and every version is slightly different. Sometimes you see the house from the outside, sometimes it's already inside your viewfinder, and the whisper that always comes at the end, low, breathless, almost tender, says the same words every time. "You watched. Now the house remembers you." There's no official copy of the footage anymore. But if you search deep enough, late at night, you might still find a download link that works, just long enough for one more person to see it. And once you do, you'll start to hear it too. That faint creak in your hallway, and the slow rhythmic sound of something moving through your house. Because the house never dies. It just finds a new viewer.